Professor Ruggeri, welcome on NaspRead. Your research focuses on the legacy of fascism. Nowadays, we keep talking about long COVID, which means the long-lasting effects on the health of those who overcome the most violent phase of the disease. Does it make any sense to talk about long fascism for the long-lasting effects on democracies that came after a regime?
Thanks for having me. I think the analogy is quite interesting, yet I tend to be very cautious with analogies, also because fascism is a political phenomenon with different actors and different ideas, and therefore some strategic events. But yet, it's true that we can think about long fascism and long violent fascism, in the sense that even though at national level, the fascist regime in Italy ended after a civil war, so in 1945, after the liberation, we can still trace long-term effect of early mover of the fascist movement to the violent cycle by neo-fascists in the years of lead between late 60s and 80s.
What are the main features of fascism?
The fascist legacy and mechanism of reproduction are based on what we call a tripod of violent knowledge. There's a knowledge about what? The ideas of fascism, ideas where the central aspect is violence, knowledge about how to be violent and how to use violent means to win politically, and knowledge about the whom. So network of people willing to support this form of violence and these ideologies. So in this way, we think that there is a strengthening, survival, and socialization of violent fascism over time.
Your research also points out that the areas with the most neo-fascist violence during the 70s are those where the fascist movement was most violent before it came to power. Is that a coincidence, or is that violence, political violence, is an attitude, is a job that can be taught to new generations?
In provinces where there were high or higher fascist membership in the 20s of the 20th century, we see over time during the years of lead more neo-fascist political violence. We don't think, and we try to show, that this is at random. We actually show that there is a possibility of transmitting what we called, and what I mentioned, the tripod of violent knowledge, thanks to underground socialization and middle level interactions. More importantly, we argue that these legacies, they behave as karst river. So there are underground river that under certain condition, and we argue when the liberal democratic governments, they signal some uncertainty how to deal with the monopoly of violence, these legacy, they can find windows of opportunity and actually use that moment of indecision how to cope with the monopoly of violence to resurface and use violent means based on fascist ideology.
Does it make any sense to say that having had a fascist regime in recent past drive democracies to a more violent political life?
It depends what we mean for recent. We had recently 100 years from March on Rome. But yes, indeed, I think we have to think carefully about the past experience of a country. And even if in this paper we talk about far-right neo-fascist violence, clearly there are also legacy that can affect far-left forms of violent political contestation. So if democracy is a way to deal with conflict in a non-violent fashion, there can be movements that actually want to challenge the major tenets of liberal democracy using violence means. And so it does make sense to pay attention to this possible risk also in situations where we think liberal democracy is solid and is our main institutional framework. I think it's risky to assume that we are violent proof, assuming that we have reached a moment of end of history where the only possibility in town is just liberal democracy is a risk for liberal democracy.